Terence "Bud" Crawford was recently asked about a potential fight with his mandatory, the always rugged and game Shawn Porter. We're going to talk about that in this here video. What up, fight world? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Make sure you smash the like button. Also subscribe to my channel for the latest and greatest in boxing. Now, let's jump right into it. We in the mix. Like Twix, we in the mix. Smash the like button. Terence Crawford, phenomenal fighter, very skilled. And his last fight, he beat Kell Brook. He beat him soundly. It was, I would say, quasi-competitive. I did have Terence Crawford losing on the scorecards, but nothing too substantial had happened. I think Kell Brook was doing pretty well with the jab. He even created some swelling around Terence Crawford's eye. However, it was nothing too crazy. It never looked like Terence Crawford was in superb trouble. You know, he was trying to fill out and see what Kell Brook was bringing. And it kind of reminded me of the Thomas Delorme fight. If you watch Terence Crawford versus Thomas Delorme, I thought Thomas Delorme was winning the early goings and the early rounds. Nothing too crazy, but he was creating a little bit of a points lead. And as soon as Terence Crawford began to turn it up, that's when the end was near. And that's what we seen in the Kell Brook fight. I had a 2-1 for Kell Brook. The third round was Crawford's round. I think he started to turn it up, and he seen, you know, try to test the waters on Kell Brook, and he's seen a little bit of something he can exploit. And then the end was near round 4. He hit him with a perfectly timed right, buckled Kell Brook. He fell into the ropes, and that was that. Game over. You know, Crawford pounced on him, wailed on him, and Kell Brook really did nothing. He just shelled up, and that was the end of it. So I think now people are at a point where they know Terence Crawford's a beast. They know Terence Crawford is good, but they're at the point where a lot of fans, I think I can speak for a lot of fans, he hasn't made all the smoothest business decisions. And, you know, based on the way he's been marketed, it's been under marketed. You look at ESPN, they have a ton of different fighters, some of them from foreign land, and they treat and roll out the red carpet for fighters like Lomachenko, Tyson Fury, two guys who are non-American. Meanwhile, you have an American guy who's as good as Terence Crawford, and they never seem to give him the same type of promotion. As far as the fight game, you look at Terence Crawford, and I think people are just trying to see him fight a name that we can all agree is more in prime and would show us something. Because so far the fights, you could really look at his whole welterweight, since he's been a welterweight, and look at all the fights, and there's always, he's doing his thing, but there's always something that could be said about the opponent. From Jeff Horn, you can really make the case that he didn't beat Pacquiao and he shouldn't be the champion, right? Jose Benavidez, you have to note that he was shot in the leg and he had a 2-year hiatus, and he came from 140. So he came from 140, was in the streets or whatever, got shot in the leg, and then he came back to 2 light touch opponents, you know, breaking, I think it was like 2016, and then he didn't come back to 2018. Top Rank just fed him like 2 unknown overmatched opponents. He won, and then they threw him in there with Crawford, you know, and he was actually doing good in the fight until his mobility seemed to suffer in the second half of the fight, you know. So all in all, Crawford's doing his thing, but, you know, look at Amir Khan. He was recently knocked out by Canelo, and he never really fought anyone since Canelo, in between until he got to Terence Crawford. He never really fought anyone at the elite level. He fought Phil LaGreco, who I thought was retired, didn't even really go rounds with him, knocked him out in 38 seconds, 40 seconds, and that was that. And then he came back and fought Samuel Vargas, struggled, and that was his fight right before Crawford. Same thing with his next opponent, Mean Machine, who he fought later that year. Mean Machine, if you know boxing, fought Ray Robinson, and most spectators and a lot of people who actually watched the fight believed that Mean Machine should have been given the nod and really beat, or excuse me, Ray Robinson should have beat Mean Machine. So there's always these kind of weird things. Kell Brook, he hadn't fought at the weight since 2017. So it had been about a good healthy 3 years. And he had some suspect performances like the Michael Zarafa. And he again was fighting Rabchenko. Yeah, he was on a 3-win streak, but see, Terence Crawford, he I seen on his Instagram live, he said a lot of y'all don't know ish about boxing. But the reality is there's people like me who do know stuff about boxing, and I do know that competition matters, you know? And the guys that Amir Khan fought after the Canelo knockout weren't on no Canelo Crawford level. The guys that Kell Brook fought after Errol Spence and Triple G losses back to back, we going back to back, yeah, right? I know that they weren't on the Crawford level, right? This stuff matters because guys like Shawn Porter, enter Shawn Porter, Crawford's mandatory. That's a great fight because we know Shawn Porter's background. Now, let me get to the direct quotes from Terence Crawford before I get into Shawn Porter and his background. Now, Terence Crawford did a recent interview with battle rapper VERB, and VERB said something to the effect of, Shawn Porter, he's a good fighter, but he's a bit reckless. So I think you'll beat his reckless butt. And Terence Crawford kind of smirked. This is exactly what Terence Crawford said in that Instagram live with VERB. When asked about Shawn Porter, Crawford says, of course, that's my mandatory. If he being Porter, exercises his mandatory and goes to the WBO and says, I need that fight, then that fight will have to happen unless I have other obligations with the unification. The only fight that can trump that Porter fight is a unification. So if I don't get Errol Spence or Manny Pacquiao, then I will have to fight Shawn Porter, end quote. Now, I like to listen to what people say and the words they choose. The only thing that I really didn't like from Crawford in this response, like, you know, at first glance, it doesn't sound like anything crazy. He says, then that fight will happen. But listen to how he's wording this. He says, if Porter exercises his mandatory and goes to the WBO and says, I need that fight. But my thing is this, if you can't get the Pacquiao fight or Errol Spence fight, why are you putting it on the challenger as champion if that's a fight that does great for both of you and telling him he needs to go to the WBO? That's one thing. He says the only fight that can trump Porter is a unification. There's only two other guys in the division with a belt outside of Crawford, and that's Manny Pacquiao. It's up to my promoter, Bob Adam, right? And Errol Spence, who has two belts from beating Shawn Porter. That was his unification fight. And he says, so if I don't get Errol Spence or Manny Pacquiao, then I will have to fight Shawn Porter. So for me, I would like to see something a little bit stronger from Crawford because there's a huge chance that he actually doesn't get Errol Spence or Manny Pacquiao next. Let's just unpack this and look at the facts. Terence Crawford and Manny Pacquiao were both with Top Rank at a point in time. Recently. Fact. Terence Crawford and Manny Pacquiao's name were linked and fans wanted to see the fight and HBO wanted to see the fight. Fact. I remember, and I have videotape because I was there, Terence Crawford in Omaha when he torched Ray Beltran and beat him, right? I have an interview with Crawford where he was asked, or it might have been the post-fight press conference, but it was at the Ray Beltran fight, whatever year that was. And Crawford was asked about Pacquiao, and I have, you know, if you watch that post-fight, you'll hear he was asked about Manny Pacquiao way back then. That's when he was at 35 fighting Ray Beltran. So from 35, then he was in 40, then he was at 47. In addition, Top Rank moved their fighters from HBO and did this deal with ESPN. During this whole time, Crawford's name was synonymous with Pacquiao. In fact, you can type in Terence Crawford, Manny Pacquiao, Boxingego into the YouTube search bar, and you'll find several videos I did pushing for the fight. I've always wanted to see that fight. I think, you know, Pacquiao is a legend and Terence Crawford's a legend in the making. So it was always a good fight. And yet and still, that whole duration when they were on HBO together, they could have fought when he was at 35. He could have moved to 40. They could have fought at a catch weight like Pacquiao did with Chris Algieri, etc. The fight never happened. Never did it seem close to happening. So for Crawford to be like, oh, the only thing that can trump the Porter fight is a unification. Errol Spence and Pacquiao are literally the only two guys outside of Crawford that have a belt. So what makes you believe that Pacquiao, who I have not seen him or heard him say one thing about fighting Crawford anytime recently, the noise is only coming from Team Crawford, people affiliated, Top Rank, ESPN writers, Terence Crawford, Bomac, etc. So what makes me believe that since this name has been floating around, or this matchup with Crawford, and it was easier to do when you guys were both with HBO, you were both with Top Rank, and then later you were both with ESPN. Top Rank and Bob Arum actually decided to give Jeff Horn, a school teacher, a Caucasian school teacher from Australia with like a 15-0, 16-0 record, and his best name on his whole record was Randall Bailey. That's who they decided to give the opportunity in Australia, so they gave him home court advantage. That would be like Top Rank making the Pacquiao fight on ESPN and putting Pacquiao Crawford, and they put it in Omaha. Why does Jeff Horn get the home court advantage and he hadn't proven anything? Then it looked like Jeff Horn, to me, lost the fight, and it looks like he was set up because the judges somehow seen him winning the fight. And then they put Crawford in there with Jeff Horn, but it's not the same. Beating Jeff Horn versus beating a legend like Manny Pacquiao are going to do different things for your career. So if I'm being real, with all the facts that I just provided for you guys, it doesn't look like we're anywhere close to getting Crawford Pacquiao. They keep throwing his name out, Team Crawford, saying Pacquiao is almost done, fingers crossed, and we were going to fight him in Qatar and UAE and these different things. However, for several years, this fight has not happened. So that leaves the only other person, Errol Spence, the only other guy with the belt. And he's clearly the A side, but Team Crawford didn't get the memo, and they don't feel like that. You get what I'm saying? So Errol Spence has already said, he's been very consistent. I'm getting the lion's share of money because I've been doing the heavy lifting. My resume is better. I'm the man in the division. I got 2 belts. He got 1. I fought the tougher competition. My brand is more marketable, which could also be corroborated by Bob Arum's recent tongue lashing that he gave Crawford, saying Crawford is not really marketable, or he's not doing a good job of marketing himself. So that's another fight. Errol Spence consistently says 60-40, and recently at the Canelo-Caleb Smith fight, he said he gets 60-40, 70-30, or whatever we offer him, he better take it. So why is Crawford keep putting out this notion that he's going to get the Errol Spence, or if I don't get, it doesn't look like you're going to get Errol Spence or Manny Pacquiao, because with Pacquiao and Errol, they're both the A side over you. He doesn't seem to think that, because Bomac recently said in an interview that they want 50-50 versus either. So it just, to me, it sounds like delusions of grandeur. Crawford, he's basing his whole leverage argument, it sounds like, off of the quality of the fighter and the skill set. Nobody's taken away from his skill set, but skill set and business is 2 different things. I used this example before. Some people out there would suggest that Javier Fortuna could beat Ryan Garcia right now. But Ryan Garcia, there's no one that would dare say that Ryan Garcia would not be the A side over Javier Fortuna when it comes to the business and the negotiating and the lion's share of the purse and stuff like that, because of the brand. So I don't know what they've conditioned Crawford to believe or what he believes internally, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen. So my standpoint is the Porter fight is still a great fight. You have Team Crawford, who they seem to almost backburner Porter and Keith Thurman, and to push Errol Spence and Manny Pacquiao fight, which they may not get. The other thing is, what is Team Crawford going to say or do if Errol Spence actually gets the fight with Manny Pacquiao? Then who are you going to fight? And from the looks of things, Yahoo Sports did a recent interview. They did a recent interview with MP Promotions, Manny Pacquiao Promotions, Shawn Gibbons, and he said that Errol Spence looked good, and they're considering Errol Spence as a 2021 foe. So I'm not really understanding Crawford's standpoint when it comes to the business and what's being said. So my thing is this: Shawn Porter sounds like a very good option and a more realistic option. He's your mandatory. He's still a person, belt or no belt. Keith Thurman, belt or no belt. These are still better fights than what Crawford has currently been receiving in his welterweight career and getting and lining up. I think even though Kell Brook beat Shawn Porter, who can argue that Shawn Porter looks to be the fresher? Like, Shawn Porter is nowhere near talks of retirement because of the way he's looking. However, Kell Brook, he was already talking about retirement before the Crawford fight, after he lost to Golovkin and Errol Spence back to back. I have never heard Shawn Porter say, you know, the Spence fight was too tough and the Danny fight was too tough. I was depressed and, you know, considering and mulling over retirement. These are just pure facts. You can look up everything that I'm saying and, you know, show me the interview where Shawn Porter says he was depressed and, you know, felt alone and became like, you know, used substance abuse and alcohol abuse because he believed, you know, his career was in ruins and stuff. You haven't simply seen that. So I'm still going to stick to my guns. I think a more realistic fight, not with Bob Arum saying $1 million. I think it's going to take more to get Shawn Porter and that done. And that goes to my other point is Crawford says if Crawford says that Porter wants to exercise his mandatory and he goes to the WBO then and says I need the fight, then the fight will have to happen. But if he goes to the WBO, that means he would get 75-25% split. Why would you not want that fight to basically make the fight regardless of the WBO rankings just to get the fight done? That's what I'm not understanding from Team Crawford. The WBO, they have like set in stone, you know, hard and fast rules, but those rules shouldn't apply to every fight. Like the different fights, they create a different marketplace. To me, Crawford versus Porter is a bigger fight. Why would Crawford get 75 and Porter get 25? But then you have Team Crawford and Terence Crawford himself saying that 60-40 is a spit in the face from Errol Spence. You know, saying 70-30 is a spit in the face. But if you go through the WBO, instead of amicably working together, Top Rank and Al Heyman, to make Crawford versus Porter, then you would be expecting Shawn Porter to get even less than what you're complaining about. Errol as top dog, big fish, offered you 60-40, even says 70-30. Both of those percentages, I'm not the smartest brother in the world, but 30 is greater than 25, right? 75 is greater than 70. So even Errol Spence offering you 70-30 is still better than 75-25 that the WBO mandates for the mandatory challenger. So I think instead of playing the politics game, if you want to fight and Porter wants to fight and the fans want to fight, just try to get the fight done and see what it's going to take at the table. Because again, these unifications don't look likely. That's my time. Let me know what you guys think in this video. Hopefully we get Shawn Porter, who just did an interview with Brian Custer, said he's been thinking about Crawford while he was training or working out. And, you know, hopefully we get that fight. Drop your thoughts in the comment section. Use my link, ESPN Plus. There's a ton of original content, docuseries, documentaries, archive footage, and more. $5.99 for ESPN Plus as a standalone app, or you get the bundle by clicking my link, ESPN Plus, Hulu, and Disney Plus. All three apps, one low price of $12.99. They got The Mandalorian back. They got new series coming out like Loki, which is a spinoff from the Thor comics, and more. Use my link. It does help the channel. Drop your thoughts in the comment section. Let me know what you guys think regarding Terence Crawford and Shawn Porter. That's all I got to say. As always, hate, comment, and subscribe. Till next video is Ego. I know. So if you enjoyed this video and want more content like this on the channel, you can show your appreciation by going to the PayPal donate button or the YouTube support button, and you can donate any amount that you feel is equivalent to the value of this video. Much more to come. Thank you guys for your support. Boxingego, the future of boxing.